Hey, this is Todd McFarlane. We just want to sit down. We're going to do a series of videos with some of the great cover artists that are going to be helping us out in the sort of artist spotlights we're going to be doing this year. And it's my pleasure to have first one out of the chute, artist extraordinaire, David Mack. He's joining us here today to have a conversation. So appreciate you joining, David.
Oh, thanks so much, Todd. That's
Yeah.
great to be here with you.
Sure. Hey, so before we get to the covers themselves and some of the process and thinking behind it, um, let the fans sort of know a little bit about your career, because you've been able to do one of the things that very few of us have been able to do, which is sort of start in comic books, if you will, and then springboard out into the rest of the world. Again, I'm not saying those that have a career in comic books their whole life, that's a good or bad thing, but I like it when I hear people having different journeys along the path, and yours is a little bit of an interesting one. So I don't know if you can sort of talk about that quickly.
Oh, right on. Yeah, no, I appreciate you looking at it like that. I mean, I guess I still think of, comics as like, it's the foundation, of everything because when I was young, I liked to do a lot of different things. But for me, comics were like the medium that united and integrated all the other things I liked. I felt like I could write a story, draw, paint, sculpt, photograph, bookmaking, character, all of that. The comic book medium united all of that. So I became very excited about that medium for me. And I have a lot of different interests, but I felt like the comic book medium was one that just was a great way to unite and integrate that. So it became kind of my playground and my laboratory is like the medium of comics. But I've been fortunate enough that, like you said, it's kind of opened some interesting doors where I've directed some music videos. I worked on opening titles like for TV shows and films, like Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I did the main titles art for that film, and I did the opening titles for the Jessica Jones series on Netflix. Some of Robert Rodriguez TV shows and some documentaries. So I like doing those things as well, and I've really enjoyed writing my own stories, collaborating. I mean, I love the nature of collaboration. Like when you work for Marvel or DC and get to work with somebody else, that's amazing. And if you get to use those characters, but also if you get to create characters and give back to that, there was a character I created called Echo that's getting a TV series from Disney Plus next year. But I've enjoyed doing things in fine art, but comics for me is still like my real love and a thing that I can do anything in.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, because people will ask me sometimes, Todd, what do you like better, toys or Hollywood or comic books or whatever else, right? And to me, the answer is they're all just different skill sets, right? So I don't really sort of compare them equally. They're just all art, right? Just with different rules applied to it. So I don't know if, given that, I'll ask you the bad question. Do you prefer doing things like you're doing in Hollywood over comic books, or are they just different skill sets, and or why do you still dabble in both?
Yeah, well, comics are really amazing because it's kind of like it's that one medium where, as you can have whatever idea you want and there's no decision by committee. You get to do whatever you want to do in that comic book. So there is nothing that compares to that. Like, I have a creator-owned series called KABUKI, and I have a new creator-owned series called Cover that's based on my overseas travels for the US State Department, but it's still a creator-owned series. And if you have a creator-owned series, you get to write it, draw it, make all the decisions. So no matter what other things you get to work with collaboratively, it's really nice. It's really nice to have something where it's uniquely your own, but also if I have something that's uniquely my own, it makes it fine to do other projects that are collaborative.
All right, I'm going to take just a quick pause. I have to leash up my dog for my wife here.
Okay. I love where we're going with this conversation. I love that you're asking these things, but I also want to say, like, thanks a lot for making time, to talk to me like this and to have me be a part of contributing the covers, for Spawn.
Right, but part of the reason for having the conversation, David, I mean, besides we'll sort of hone down into your covers and get specific about that and Spawn and all that other stuff. That, to me, that's a bucket. I think what is sometimes more important is talking about the paths of different creators, because it will enlighten, hopefully, future artists to the possibilities that are out there, right? I mean, again, I'm not saying if you do what you did, all of a sudden you're going to do comic books in Hollywood and be nominated for big awards, or if you follow my path, it's going to work. We're just saying that the possibility exists because both of us broke into comic books and had no idea where it was going to lead, right? So these sort of happy accidents that now give us other opportunities, and those opportunities then begat other opportunities. The next thing you know, you're doing things that when we first both broke in, I'm sure neither one of us expected, right? And that's sort of the surprise and a little bit of the joy of just starting a journey in any career. And that's sort of voice I like to give when I'm up on stage, is doing that. So I'm thrilled to be able to have a conversation with somebody who sort of diverged from, a straight line, if you will. So they come to you from Hollywood. I mean, I guess usually there's two ways, David. There's usually you go to them and you seek it out and you hope that they give you a job sometime. And the other time is you're just sitting around, the phone rings and you get this serendipitous phone call. How did it work for you?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I'm delighted to hear everything you said about, what we're doing and what we're talking about. It just reminds people of all the possibilities that are out there. And just because somebody did something one way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. There's all these possibilities to happen. And when people see you doing things the way you did, which hadn't been done before, it reminds them that, oh yeah, I can get off the beaten path too. And I can go down an unknown path and make something interesting.
What we become, and not just you and I, but literally dozens and dozens of others, are examples of the possibilities. That's it. That's the value that I think our stories have, and are worth being told. So anyway.
Yeah, and I want to add to that it's not just an example of like achieving something, but just the example of continuing to do it. Like, we're just so blessed that we get to continue to do this, and just like people just showing up every day and trying to do their A game and giving their all on it. That's like an example to me too. Like, I always like to see that happening, and that's kind of the reward for us at the same time. Not what we get from it, but that we get to do this wonderful.
Yeah, the reality too of being an artist, but in this case, we both came up as comic book artists first, is that with the world, at least as it is right now, and the way comic conventions go on the internet and everything, you and I can do art till we take our last breath, as long as we're healthy, right? As long as we're healthy in our hand works, you and I, if we so choose, could be doing art to our last breath, either for ourselves or making commerce out of it, right? Somebody will probably ask me till the day I die, if I can you do me a Venom head, right? Do me a Spawn head, right? Whatever the equivalent is for both of us. That's not a luxury that many occupations afford the person who starts that career. Usually you go 40 years, you quit, you're done at 65, and you go into retirement and you hope you had enough savings, right? Where you and I can be a little more sort of flamboyant with worrying about retirement, because in our brains we could trick ourselves to saying we never have to, and there will be an economic stream coming every day of our life if we so choose it. So I don't know if you give much thought to your future, but if so, could you speak to that?
Yeah, no, I like everything you said. Well, I'll answer that in combination to what you said before about, so I did a creator-owned series called Kabuki at a small independent publisher called Caliber Comics. Um, and that I started doing it in 1993. I was just barely like 20 years old. I was still in college, and I did it for my senior thesis in literature for college. So I knew I wanted to do comics when I was in university, but at that time where I went, they didn't have classes for comics, and they didn't have you couldn't major in doing it. So I got a BFA in graphic design because graphic design was taught as a synthesis of type and image. And I thought I could learn from that because that's what comics are, and I can apply it into my real world. And it entailed taking all of the design classes and all of the fine arts classes, but it was also a university. So I was taking all of the, the required general studies classes as well, which opened me up to all new worlds. I had to take foreign languages. I had to take psychology, physiology. I was taking, pre-med classes. I was taking a lot of things that I was learning from that were making my world bigger, but I was funneling it, channeling it into my work. So I did this series called Kabuki, and I was trying to use it for every class that I could. So I would use it for my writing class, and then I was pretty precocious.
You were repurposing it.
Yes, I was like 17 when I started college, so I was pretty young and precocious. And I would say, I would try to make the case for the graphic design person why my comic book satisfied the requirements for this graphic design thing. And then I had like a bookmaking class, other classes, logo classes, and I felt like, look, this comic book does all of that.
Did they to interrupt you? Did they try to steer you in a direction when you were in college? I know they did. I know they did for me. They want, all the classes I took were to be a fine artist, an artiste, if you will, right? So.
Yeah. In all my fine arts classes, I felt like the outsider in all of the classes. In the fine arts classes, I didn't, I was happy to learn the fine arts techniques, and I was applying them. But because I was also in graphic design and doing a comic book, I was somewhat of an outsider. And in all the graphic design classes, I wasn't training to be, to make corporate logos specifically, or, labels for canned goods or something. I knew I had already decided that I was going to do comics. So I was kind of an odd character to them, but what I realized that college teaches you is that you're inside a system, and you have to learn how to navigate a system. You have to learn how to satisfy the requirements of the system, but you also have to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of this? Is it also satisfying the requirements of what I want from it? And so I feel like above any diploma or the individual classes, college is a great preparation to learn how to navigate systems that you find yourself in life, right? And how to do it diplomatically, how to talk with people, in a way that's hopefully not coarse or off-putting, and make some kind of communication with them. And so I was able to do that with some of the professors. And so I was doing a published comic book that was coming out every 2 months. And that from it being out, I started to get inquiries about, about people asking to do Kabuki as a film. So right from the beginning, I was doing it in 93. It started being published in 94. And I would say by 95, I had already signed like an option deal with Fox. And so since 95 on, like Kabuki has always been optioned, be optioned, and they'll pay you to write some work, and I'll do a certain amount of work.
Extend it, it lapses, somebody else picks it up, it goes, they extend it. Yeah, you can keep this going for a long time. So.
Yeah. So in these days, it's this new golden age of television which is, it's a long format story, which is more similar to comics, with like an incremental story with a cliffhanger, told in a serial format like comics are already. So, now like it was always being developed as a film, but now it's always being developed as a TV show.
Well, I when I get up on stage, I keep telling people that Disney is not going to share, for the most part, their Marvel characters, and Warner Brothers is not going to share DC. So all the other entertainment corporations, and those are billion-dollar corporations, need content. And so all of a sudden, things like Spawn Kabuki have a sort of elevated value to them now, because you have to redact, is the word I use, all the Marvel and DC on all the list. Whatever list you see, you have to redact Marvel DC, because you're not going to get them. If you're Paramount, you're not going to get any Marvel DC. If you're Universal, you're not going to get any of it, right? If you're Apple or Hulu, although I guess Hulu's owned by Disney, but Apple, right? So everybody has to start finding their own pieces. And this is why I think, besides comic books is a great place to try and earn a living anyways, I think that the opportunities to go outside it have increased, because Warner Brothers and Disney have clamped down on their character, and everybody else is looking. And so obviously they're going to come across not only things of merit that are winning awards and sales, but they'll grab anything that they think has a good story bite to it, whether the sales of a comic book are there or not. Content's content. Good content's good content. Whether it because I think there are some things that will translate. I mean, let's just stop on that thought. In his heyday, Robert Kirkman wasn't selling 23 million copies a month. Yet there were weeks when 23 million people were watching The Walking Dead, right? So his comic book wasn't doing that. I'm sure he would have loved it, but it wasn't so. So it was able to take something that at that time was selling this much and expand it, to your idea. If we stay on Hollywood for a bit, as a comparison to comic book, what's your sort of balance and act, given that one sort of a group of people in a group think, and then the other one doing a creator-owned comic book is essentially you in the corner doing whatever the hell you want, right? How do you navigate both of those mentally?
I think that's kind of good for me. I think I need both of those things. I need like my own space, you know, and like to percolate something in my own way and not have to worry if anyone else gets it. But I think it's also good for me to learn how to play well with others and, you know, collaborate. And it's also fun to do a creator-owned project, you know, with another creator that you respect.
Yeah.
You know, and to that end, even when from Kabuki, from my creator-owned series, I'll tell you this: when I was first working on Kabuki, I only thought of myself as a writer for it. I had written it and I was looking for different artists to draw it. And I eventually had to kind of trick myself into doing the art for it. But from the story on Kabuki, that's what got me the offer to start writing Daredevil at Marvel. So my first work ever for Marvel, I started as a writer on Daredevil, taking over Daredevil after Kevin Smith, with Joe Quesada doing the artwork. He's the one who hired me. And then while we were working together, me as the writer and him as the artist, he became editor-in-chief while we were working on Daredevil together. So that was also an incredible like lesson in collaboration for me, because before, everything I had written, I had written for other artists, even under Kabuki, but it was my character. So everything I wrote, it was correct because it was mine, right? But when I had to, if I'm writing Daredevil, it became a twofold challenge for me, because it became a collaborative challenge, because I wanted to be respectful to the rich history that the character had, and respectful to what the other character creators had brought to it historically in the mythology of Daredevil. But I also felt like I also need to bring something new to it as well that hasn't been there before. Otherwise, why am I doing it, right? So you kind of have that, you want to be respectful and collaborative. You're collaborating with the history, but you're also collaborating with your current collaborators in the book, like in this case, Joe Quesada drawing and Palmiotti inking and Eisenhoff coloring. And that was a wonderful lesson. I like that too. And for me, who had started with Kabuki, where I write it, draw it, letter it, deal with the printer, do the letters column, all of a sudden for Daredevil, I was writing, and then it felt like everybody else did all the hard stuff. And then magically a comic book showed up. So it was kind of it was a good experience for me to learn in the independent world and have to know how to do all that hard stuff on my own. And then it was kind of a joy, you know, when Marvel did all the hard work about the publishing.
To your point, people have asked me about Spawn. Like, how do you keep going for 300 issues or whatever else? I keep saying a little bit what you said, which is I need it in my life, right? Because
Yeah.
I do that other side like you, where it is groupthink, and I like it because it's I like being in a room with other creative people. Matter of fact, I like being in a room with creative people that are way smarter than me, because it's a joy to sort of have this team effort and don't feel like when you're doing a comic book that it's all on your shoulders at times, which can be a bit daunting, especially when you have deadline. But after dealing at times with big corporations, I find that when I turn and I pivot to comic books and I see my little guy Spawn standing in the corner, and I can do whatever I want at the end of the day, and I don't have to ask any permission, it's actually sort of good for my psyche to just go, because
Absolutely.
sometimes, as you know, you don't. In fact, a lot of times you don't get what you want when you're sort of, doing freelance work for a big corporation. You try to do the best you can, but it's their money. They get to make the decisions they want, and it's nice to be able to sort of flip that sort of story onto your own and go, now for the last 2 hours of today, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. I love having that kind of balance. I love being able to work with other people who are, if you're blessed, if you're lucky, you get to work with like some really smart, creative people that are going to bring something unique to it that you wouldn't have figured out on your own. And so that's a joy to collaborate. But it's also a joy to have that space to do your own thing too.
So let's jump tracks a little bit and get a little more specific. We have instituted for 2023 a sort of artist spotlight on the 4 books I do, right? Like Marvel, DC, and any company puts out a lot of books can't really do it because you'd have to pick and choose a handful of books, or you'd have to get somebody to do it for all your books. You're not going to find either one of those. It becomes, you got to start picking your favorites. Given that I only have 4, I can actually find people and cover all 4, so they can basically do my entire lineup of books. You were kind enough to come on board and do the first set of 4, and those 4 books are Spawn, King Spawn, Gunslinger, and the Scorched. So we'll be putting up obviously the covers for people who haven't seen all 4 of those, or you can Google them, look at it. Hopefully, there's a bunch of collected them all. But talk to me about what your process was, given that I tried to get out of the way of all the artists, right? So.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was lovely to be, invited. Thomas approached me in person at San Diego Comic Con and discussed it, and I thought, wow, what a, I never imagined I would be invited to do covers for Spawn before. So it was such a, unusual compared to a lot of the other subject matter I had done, and it was like it was a fresh thing for me to do, and I wanted to, again, it's got to be Spawn, so I want it to be. I really liked Jason's Sean Alexander's work on Spawn, which was really good.
Yeah.
Like I felt did that really well. It was still like Spawn, but it still had like a very expressive feel to it.
Yep.
So yeah, I just started, tinkering and doodling, and I love that I got to do like the 4 different covers, so each of them could have like a different vibe to it.
Yeah,
I think
it's one of the things I noticed, Dave, that like if you look at, let's say, the Spawn cover you did, I would call that arguably the most realistic. Let's use that word. And then probably the next step next to that would be sort of the Scorched with the She Spawn. And then you get into the 2 covers, King Spawn and Gunslinger, that to me I would sort of put in the bucket of being like cool graphics, and not really worrying about whether you've got a body and a bunch of anatomy and all those other things that we normally would do. So what was the thinking of sort of doing a spectrum? Just you didn't want to bore yourself and do the same thing 4 times, or
No, yeah,
was it intentional, or you just going, wow, I hadn't thought about it, Todd?
No, I think, yeah, I think on some level it's intentional. Like, yeah, I felt like to a certain degree with the Spawn one, you know, I felt like I needed to do one that like, some, you know, somewhat was going down the track of what I thought people might be, you know, expecting from what a Spawn cover would be. And then I felt like, okay, now that I've done that, maybe I've earned myself some latitude to be a little bit more expressive, you know, for the other ones where maybe they're more like a movie poster or something, you know, that might be just like what the energy or vibe of it is. And so, yeah, when I did the Gunslinger one, I was really happy with that. I was like, oh, maybe this would be like an old style movie poster or something for Gunslinger Spawn. And then when I did King Spawn last, and it was the one where I'd done the other ones and I felt like, okay, I can be more, I'm going to let myself be more expressive with this last one. So yeah, I think even if it wasn't 100% conscious, I think to a degree, like you're very sensitive that's exactly what was going on.
Here's the thought about doing the cover artist spotlights. You could come on board and do a cover here or there for me, right? I would argue you could do 4 for me, but if I scatter the 4 covers, sometimes they can get lost, right? It's not only lost within the stuff that I do, but lost within what Image does, and then lost within the totality of the comic industry, right? So I was trying to figure out a way of doing covers by meaningful artists that would actually draw a little bit more attention. And the thought was, well, instead of getting them to do a couple here and a couple there, why don't I just glom them all together and say, hey, everybody, if you like this artist, every book I'm doing that month is going to have their art, right? You should go and check it out. They're all going to be cool. And especially if it's a favorite artist of yours. For those that are not familiar with every single artist I'm going to put on there, they're going to at least be able to get a consistency. So if they do like, I'm going to assume one, they may actually take a look at the other 3 and maybe even buy the other 3. So I know cover art is a very hard thing to do, given that there's so many prolific cover artists out there. And this was just my way to go, hey, you know, take a look at some of these people, you being the first one up, take a look at David Mack's artwork. I think you guys have seen it. You might not have noticed it maybe because it's been here and here and here and here. Let me put it together all at once. So hopefully it draws a little bit more attention to you than doing one cover. And like I said, we can have this discussion about the process of all of it.
Yeah, I think that was a really smart way to do it. And it having all 4 also kind of like you said, gives me the freedom to kind of show a different facet with each of the covers, like a different facet of how I might approach things slightly differently too.
What's before we get going here, what would be a couple of sort of pointers that you would have for people doing covers?
Okay, well, I've been doing a lot of covers lately, so I do have quite a bit of thought on that. You know, I look at the cover as the main job of the cover. People, you know, catch their attention up to it. If they see it online, make them click on it. And if they see it in real life, you want them to pick it up, you know? So the first thing I want the cover to do is to grab their attention, even if they're seeing it from a distance in real life, or even if they're seeing it in a tiny thumbnail online, right? So I usually start with some kind of bold shape because even if they can't see the details from a distance, or if it's a small thumbnail, I want the shape to be something that distinguishes itself from the other things that they're seeing at the same time. So I think of like the comic book cover, not just on its own, but in its natural habitat in the wild. You normally see the comic book cover on a shelf with 100 other covers, right? So a lot of those covers have stuff going from edge to edge, and they kind of bleed together.
Yep.
So I want my cover to jump out from all of those. And so a lot of times what I'll do for that is I'll try to create on the edges what I call a buffer zone or some kind of space framing,
Yep.
where I might have the edges be somewhat blank or white or a solid color. So it immediately separates itself from whatever's next to it.
I've taken people's art, my own and others, and intentionally just put that border around it just for the exact same reason you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
else, every other comic book bleeds. And if you do it from time to time where it doesn't bleed, it catches your eye because you're going, why is that one different? Even if it's just the border, they'll look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah. And I usually think like, maybe there's like there's three interesting parts of the cover. Like sometimes in the drawing, I'll have a lot more than that. And then once I refine it, I usually kind of try to sculpt it down to kind of three main things, whether that's like like a main figure or like, and then like a face in the background, and then some other kind of design on top of that. That's kind of like enough three things. Once it becomes, when I'm drawing, I'll put lots of things in there. But then when you're turning it into like a real drawing or a painting and in the finished part, you kind of realize that sometimes less is more, and you don't want too many things fighting for attention.
I also noticed that your choice of white is there. It's a color choice that I think is really wise, given, as you said, it sometimes you can go into a comic shop and just saturate it with color. That a lot of black on a cover or a lot of white sometimes is it's sort of the MO that will make yours stick out. Why do you like white so much? For that reason?
Yeah, that's true. It's contrast, like anytime you're doing some kind of art or using color, I'm always thinking in terms of contrast. And I'm thinking, these colors or these brush strokes or, the coagulation that the watercolor is making, sometimes it looks good because it's contrasted against, if it's the same thing is next to the same thing, it cancels itself out. But if you have an interesting mark or an interesting color, but, the background is the absence of the mark or color, then it stands out. And it also kind of serves as like the framing mechanism. It might not fill out, there might be white around the edges, like in even like sort of an organic or ragged way, not like a specific frame, but like almost like it's somewhat of a psychological frame, in a sense. I don't want people to think I'm putting a frame on it, but it's functioning that way.
And before we go, what can fans of your artwork or just fans of good art look forward to that has your name on it?
So all my creator-owned stuff right now is at Dark Horse Comics. All my Kabuki, Dark Horse collected my Kabuki volumes into 4 giant omnibus volumes. Each one is 416 pages each.
Wow.
So if people aren't familiar with Kabuki, really, the majority of my writing and drawing and interior art and comics is 1,600 pages of
Yeah. No, it's where I first discovered your artwork.
Oh, great. Yeah, so all my creator-owned stuff is there. I've got 2 art books. One's called Dream Logic, one's called Reflections at Dark Horse. And my creator-owned series, it's called Cover. It's myself and Brian Bendis. It's Dark Horse also just released a new paperback collection of that just came out. But like I said before, it's based on, like, for the last decade, I've been traveling overseas. One of the reasons I kind of went more into doing covers and less into interior art is I've been traveling for the State Department overseas. And so much of the year I was in other countries, almost all year round. And it had such an effect on me that we worked on a creator-owned series called Cover that's inspired by my overseas travels for the State Department. So the first volume of that is collected and out right now, and I'm working on the new volume of that. And we're also working on a TV series of that.
Oh, wow. Good for you. Yeah, Brian Bendis has always been a favorite writer of mine too. So I'm sure the combination is staggering for those of you who haven't seen it yet. So, well, David, I'm sure that if we get together in 5 years and do this, both of us will have sort of moved up one more rung on some weird ladder someplace, because again, momentum has a funny way of allowing, like I said, weird doors to open and opportunities to come along. But thanks for like talking to people and letting them know sort of your process, but more importantly, let them know that the box of being an artist can be very big and grow every single day. So thanks for being the first one out of the gate on our cover artist spotlight. It was a pleasure getting your covers, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Todd. This was wonderful speaking with you.